Find each of the parts described below. For each one, create a diagram that demonstrates your thinking. So in the directions they're saying find, that's the vocabulary, the action word, parts of part. So when I'm looking for part of part, that means they're given fraction of another fraction. So another word for part could be fraction. And then for each one, create a diagram. So when we create a diagram is to demonstrate the thinking. So let's start with example A. So we're given 3/4 of 5/8, and the words do mean something. So when we start, we actually draw the diagram of the 5/8 first. That's where we're gonna start. To draw 5/8, what I want to do is shade 5, but I need to draw 8 equal pieces. So I'm going to use my square paper, and because I'm gonna be finding part of a part, I want to make it pretty large. And then looking at the denominator at the bottom, when I go 5, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 8. So let's see. So continue to until you have 8. So horizontally, I have 5/8. But then I have to create part of that, and specifically it needs to be divided into 4 pieces. So that's the 4 that so I'm going to make it large enough to have 4 equal pieces. Okay, so I'm going to make a rectangle that represents 5/8. To do that, I'm going to shade 5 parts of this big rectangle, and then I'm going to do the 3/4 later. So let's shade it. So that will be 3/4 of 5/8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. So that represents 5/8 of this big rectangle. Now that I have the 5/8, I need to find 3/4 of it. So basically I'm looking for this rectangle now only, because that's the part, and I have to divide it into 3/4. So remember, I divided it into 4 pieces earlier because of the denominator, so I'm going to divide it in 4 equal pieces sideways. And now I need to shade 3 of them. So let's see, I'm going to use 3 of them. So right here, so let's shade. So as I'm shading, you can see how these, so I have to shade 3 of them, 3, and then the 4th one is blank. So now that's the diagram, but what is the result? So the result is what you see over here. I'm going to make it in red. So this is the result of the part of part, which looks smaller than either of the initial fraction and the second fraction. So how does that relate to the original? So we created even smaller fractions, so we need to count how many little parts are shaded and how many do we have total, right? So this is the shaded one that we have, but how does it compare to the other side? So what I'm going to do is continue making them so I can count how many I have, but only, and I'm gonna highlight it, red is the result of our work. So if you count them, actually pause the video and count the red shades and out of the total shades. So as a result of counting, or as the result of basically the repetition, you should have the fraction, the result will be 15. So I counted 15 of those red ones over, and then the total, how many of those little ones as total. So if you count them, is 4 by 8, so that is 32. So the result of what we saw in the diagram, it almost like we could say it's multiplication. So 3 times 5 gave us those 15 pieces, and then 4 times 8 gives us those 32 total pieces. And if we could reduce the fraction. So they're both, 15 is made out of 3 times 5, and then 32 does not have a 3 or a 5, so if we don't have to reduce, so the answer will be 15 out of 32 as a product or final answer. So go ahead and try the other ones on your own. I do want to start you with letter B though before I let you continue. So we have 3/8 and then there's a little dot in between them. That means that word of. So we are given 3/8 of 2/3, or it means multiplication. So when we're starting our diagram, we want to start with 2/3. However, when we want to make 2/3 large enough, so later to be divided into 8 equal pieces. So if I start with 2/3, I'm just going to go, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3. And when I'm shading, I'll be shading 2/3 like that. Now, but how deep can I make this box? And I want my box to have 8 of those equal parts. So I'm going to count down 8 as I'm doing it so that it can address that 8 in the denominator for the next piece. So as I count it, now I'm going to make my one whole be basically 3/8. So I'm using the denominators and I'm going to now divide it into 2/3. So we started here, however we addressed the 8. So I'm dividing into 3 parts all the way. The whole is the big rectangle, and shade 2 of them. And then do your 3/8 and follow exactly what I did in example A and check your work. So do C and D on your own.